it genuinely can get quite complex, and I think at this scale there's not many who have solved the problem really, and so it's very difficult to kind of Google how to run a 15,000 dbt model project for hundreds of data practitioners. AI also kind of struggles with these because again it was trained on data, so how is it going to solve this problem? If there's anyone listening considering kind of putting this forward to their senior leaders and kind of trying to explain that thinking about user experience for data is something that's valuable, the thing that I would say is essentially that this is the single biggest change that you can make to the speed that the company produces and consumes data. If it's easy for people to be able to develop data and get insights out faster, then everything else is downstream of that, right? So this is ultimately is a multiplier. I think there's been lots of articles talking about how software developers are no longer developers, they're more like software reviewers. So you're reviewing code a lot more than writing. But the truth of the matter is that if you are reviewing code more often, then you have a lot more time to think about what you're doing and how you're going to do it and whether or not that's best for your specific use case. And that ability to detach from the work that you're doing and go, do I need to rethink this? Do I need to pivot here? Would there be a better way to do it? Removing that barrier and friction to starting again or tweaking genuinely to me feels like a superpower.
Today's episode is brought to you by Omni. Most companies I speak to want AI analytics, but are failing to put projects into production. That's where Omni's different. It's the semantic brain that grounds AI in the heart of your business logic, giving you governed answers, whilst also the depth to identify root causes. It's intelligence everywhere, from your spreadsheets to their chat feature, even within your product. Omni moves you beyond the dashboard. Don't just take my word for it. Trust teams like Perplexity and Synthesia that are already using Omni to deliver intelligence that people trust. Check out them in the show notes or visit omni.co. That's omni.co. Now, back to the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Stacks Data podcast. Today I'm joined by Bruno Campos, the lead or one of the lead analytics engineers at Monzo. At this point Monzo is definitely fair to say has scaled. They've got tens of millions of customers and one of the largest analytics engineering teams anywhere, which means the data platform that is built on has to operate at a pretty serious scale. Bruno sits on the analytics platform team within Monzo, where he's been deeply involved in helping to roll out and championing a major redesign of Monzo's analytics architecture, what the team now refers to as the OOM data architecture, built around object-oriented modeling principles. In the episode, we're going to unpack why Monzo's data platform is shifting, what it looked like before, what it's moving into, and what actually made them think about this architecture in this way at scale. We'll also touch upon Bruno and his AI capabilities and how he's applying LLMs into the workflow of an analytics engineer and what he really thinks about the role and where it's heading. So, Bruno, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, look, I know we know each other well, Bruno, over the years, but for anyone that doesn't know you, give an intro to yourself and I suppose where you've got to in your career.
Yeah, sure. I'm Bruno, working at Monzo at the moment as an analytics engineer. I've pretty much have a pretty standard data career, I suppose. I started off as a data analyst and then slowly moved further and further towards the engineering side. I think I've always been interested in tech and have attempted building websites and some apps on my own a few points in time, and data engineering seemed to be a nice marriage of those two concepts. And I love numbers, I love data, so that worked out quite nicely. Currently working at Monzo, and as you described, we have a pretty interesting challenge ahead of us with the current state of the data warehouse at Monzo for such a large estate. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the intro, Bruno. And yeah, I mean, for those again that don't know, Monzo has one of the largest analytics engineering teams in the industry. So, to help contextualize it, let's get a flavour of what the team actually looks like, how AE is structured to solve problems day to day.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so the way that the company works is that we've got these departments, which we call collectives, and they can get pretty large. I think compared to some startups, you could even consider them almost like a separate companies, especially when it comes to the sheer size of people working in them and therefore the data that they produce. And the way that the data discipline is structured is that you have dedicated data efforts within each collective. Some distributions vary, of course, so some collectives might have a lot more AEs than others might have just data analysts or just data scientists, it depends. But that is kind of the organizational structure. And then from kind of a stack perspective, we work off of one repo, one analytics repo where everybody can contribute to. And of course, one warehouse. So we use BigQuery, and then that's where everybody's data lives, and that's where they work on. That's where everything is.
Excellent. And you've moved from onto the platform team. What's the difference between your embedded AEs, the platform AEs, and what kind of problems sit across the two different types of roles?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I think one that not many people get the opportunity to explore, as not many data teams are as big or mature as this, right? So I think that's quite interesting. So I started off in operations, ops, and I was indeed one of those embedded AEs. I suppose the focus there is pretty much on making sure that the data estate for the stakeholders, the users of your data, are ready to be used. And that can take quite a few different shapes. For the most part, it does involve lots of data modeling and keeping your data models and your section of the repo very tidy and with high quality, observable, so you've got monitoring and that sort of thing. But you also naturally sit a lot closer, and you're expected to sit a lot closer to the specific product that you're working with. And that might be an actual product within the app. So if you have a Monzo account, if you go into the bank section and you have a page, the growth page, for example. So it might be that you sit really close to a particular product, or as is the case with operations, it might be purely the customer help functionality that might work. And that is an interesting contrast with the platform side, where of course your main stakeholders are the other technical users of data within the company. So you're almost like an internal product, right? And I think the main difference there, and probably one that I tend to prefer in every role that I've been in, is that whenever you're creating these more platform-shaped products, you have to solve the problem for your specific company. And I think that to me is a very interesting problem to have, because every company is slightly different, and data as a discipline industry-wide has very unique shapes depending which company you're in. And so when you're in a platform team for data, you're having to kind of doubly solve the problems internally. And the best part is that you can go speak to your customers directly, right? They sit right across from you. And so I suppose in the same way, you're still expected to sit close to the customer. It's just that happens to be internal.
Interesting, really good breakdown there, Bruno. So we're going to dive into this whole new re-architecture that Monzo's been doing of the analytics platform, and I think it'd be good to stay first off, if anyone wants to dive deeper into what me and Bruno are discussing. Monzo have actually gone live with a blog article that would put a link to in the show notes. But Help set the scene, Bruno. What is the actual scale of Monzo's sort of data estate, the number of models, warehouse usage, and what were the types of challenges that you started running into?
We've essentially had to manage a pretty big estate. We're looking at about tens of thousands of DBT models all within one project. And then to echo back on the description of the org, the collectives themselves are between 10, 15, I'm not really sure how many exactly, but the independent teams within them can go up to about 100 if you were to count each different section. So that should kind of give you a pretty good view of the complexity. And with all of these models and all of these teams come so many different micro decisions that the company has made over time that slowly compound and compile into this bigger thing, I guess is the best way to describe it. Because it genuinely can get quite complex, and I think at this scale, there's not many who have solved the problem really, and so it's very difficult to kind of Google how to run a 15,000 DBT model project for hundreds of data practitioners, and AI also it kind of struggles with these because again it was trained on data, so how is it going to solve this problem? And then of course there's the human element as well, which is managing all of these people become a very difficult thing to do as well, purely on the basis of, okay, like where do you draw the line on rules, and what do you let happen within the warehouse? What are the standards that you want to adhere to, and so on. So that problem is still here, right, even after the re-architecture, but that should hopefully outline the motivation to try to make the architecture the simpler part of this complex puzzle. And that was one of the things that we could do as a business, which is to solve that element and try to make that piece of the puzzle, the architecture, more opinionated, with more guardrails, with the hopes that one, we get standardization across the business within all these different hundreds of teams, but then also speeding up, hopefully. That's the goal, right? Faster models, faster to build, faster to change. If you get seconded and you go into another team for whatever reason, because it's so standardized, you're not really looking at the completely different world and you have to learn everything from scratch. So that's the very short before, and then hopefully teaser for the after as well.
The vision. No, I like that. And when you joined, you obviously the team had already were in the weeds of identifying these problems and starting to design the new architecture. What stood out to you most about the situation when you stepped in, and what made you think that they're going in the right direction?
I think the first impression I had, to be honest, was that I had a bit of a panic to be completely honest, because when I joined it seemed like they had kind of solved everything. The platform team are honestly like top class, industry wide. And when I joined, and I think I've spoken to a lot of people who've joined Monzo as well, is that from onboarding, everything is very slick. There's a lot of things that are kind of handled for you. But then the other side of that coin, the panic that I alluded to, is that, as an analytics engineer, fairly new role, right? This has not been around for very long. The boundaries and lines for this role within data are murky at best. For any data role is already quite difficult to draw specifically. And from my experience, I've always been quite close to the tooling, the platform, and that sort of thing. So when I joined Monzo and I saw the size of the estate and kind of the scale that we were working at, I had all these ideas. I was like, right, I'm going to build this tool to do this, and I'm going to automate this bit, I'm going to do that. And within every time that I came up with an idea, I would find a related, already written Notion document on either the solution already being in production or something that the team was already considering, that sort of thing. So I felt a little bit, I guess, overwhelmed, but then also very impressed with just how much thinking was being done for the company. And of course, you'd kind of expect that in hindsight, right, Bruno? Speaking to myself, because it's a very successful bank, and it is a bank, and it's got to have a high standard. And when I was looking beyond the tooling and the platform and kind of looking at the actual data modeling, obviously at the time I joined, we were just talking about the new architecture, but we hadn't actually built anything within it. It was quite stark. Within my career, I think most of the time have worked somewhere in the middle, where it wasn't as a free form, if you will, as the previous Monzo architecture and ways of working, but it also wasn't as opinionated as the one that we're currently working in now. And this was something that I had to come to grips with and kind of think about quite deeply and understand the why that was so important when I joined. I think this is something that we talk a lot about, is trying to pass on that part of the thought process behind the architecture. Like, why did we get here? Like, why did we make the decision to not allow this particular join on this particular type of model? What is it? If you don't know the why, it seems arbitrary. But again, like I alluded to before, the team has really good a really good culture of documenting and kind of working through all of their ideas, so that it's easy to access. And today, with your AI friend, you can easily search through it and it can come back with really, really good answers. It was honestly quite impressive. I was a little bit overwhelmed, like I said, but very much hopeful to kind of see this new idea, this new thing, try it out, and then one day talk about it more publicly. And look, here we are.
Here we are. No, excellent. You said there obviously about the importance of sharing that why. How do you go about doing that? Because I think it's obviously, I can agree more of how important it is. But yeah, how do you go about sharing the why and making sure everyone's living and breathing it?
Yeah, and it's such a good question. I'm not going to make any claims that I've solved this or we've solved this yet. We're still working on sharing and making sure everybody's adopting it and making sure that everybody understands the logic behind it, but also being extremely conscious that this isn't necessarily supposed to be like, all right, we've done, like, we're never changing, right? We're supposed to grow and learn. But something we're working on a lot now is from kind of looking at the entire, I guess, life cycle of somebody joining the company. One question actually that we recently had was, okay, so we're technically not building any models in the old architecture anymore. Okay, great. What does our onboarding look like? Do we still kind of explain what the old ways of working is? And there's two sides to that, right? You could say yes, because then you have that context, and whenever someone goes, okay, but why can't I do this join in this one model in this one weird, place? It's like, well, okay, that's because we had all of these other scenarios, and that's how we got here, right? And that builds a nice picture, a nice narrative. But then, similarly, we also want to move away from the old architecture, and at some point we will entirely. When is that? When do we draw that line and say, okay, in the onboarding even, we don't mention the old architecture? The truth is that at the moment we still have both living side by side as we migrate. The process is long and arduous, as anyone who's ever migrated from warehouses or architectures would know. But it involves a lot of presentations, it involves a lot of Slack posts, it involves a lot of almost internal articles and blog posts. And quite frankly, to be very, very candid, I think it involves a lot of patience. You need to have the patience to kind of work through the changes with people, because they might have not, first of all, not everybody was there in the room when you were going through coming up with the solutions. And that's just natural. That's how big companies function. But you need to make sure that there's enough information out there, and that whenever people ultimately meet that information, it comes across with empathy and kind of explains and walks you through the story. I'm a big narrative enjoyer. So the way that I write, the way that I present is very much with it's 2 a.m. and you get a pager on your watch, and then you get an alert, and it's like, okay, this model's broken, but you don't know who owns it. That's why this standard exists, to say you cannot merge a model unless there's an owner tag, right? Like, so for me, I think that's like an effective way of help sharing that why. But there's a lot of methods, and we're still working on trying to get everybody to kind of go through the journey with us as they join.
Yeah, no, I think the narratives and stories are key to selling, to influencing, to changing opinions. So I can see why. And I know John, that's the party who was previously on the podcast last year. I believe he's your manager, right?
Yes, that's right.
He spoke very highly about you being the lead champion for this new architecture. How have you gone about? You've alluded to some of the points there, but like for other people that are in the midst of a migration or changing an architecture or whatever it might be, how do you see yourself being an effective champion to influence?
Yeah, it's a good question. Which I think the difficulty in answering this question is that everyone has their own ways of approaching things. The way that I like to approach it is, if I can understand the why, and then if I can then tell that back to someone, then it means that I understood it quite well. I think there's a quote by someone much smarter than me, but which is that if you can teach it, that means that you know the subject extremely well. And I often look for opportunities like that, of when I could. It's very uncomfortable. It's extremely uncomfortable in the beginning when you yourself aren't fully 100% confident in all the different details. But if you put yourself in positions to help guide others, and that was kind of what I did with this Champions program thing, it meant that I, by design, needed to become more of an expert in it. So, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of going through documentation, but also nowadays we have so many different resources to help you digest information. I'm a big fan of tools like Notebook LM that can create a little podcast for you. If you're a listener of this, you probably do like podcasts. And you can use it to just put any sort of document or article online and generate information for you there, or create a presentation to help you understand. So for me, that's kind of how I approach this, is digest, try and put yourself in positions where you'd have to explain that to someone who doesn't know anything. You don't really need someone. You can do that on your own and try to explain the topic. But I think what's also probably the most important, and probably what I should have started with, is you have to believe that the thing that you're championing is worthy of being championed. And I think in this case it was.
Yeah, I think, as you said, being able to explain something is so critical in layman's terms as well, especially in such, the data being such a technical field. Most data professionals have to deal with non-technical folks on a daily basis. So if you can communicate to them what you're doing in an effective way, then I think you're onto a good stretch, and you can hopefully bring people along on that journey. So Bruno, as we said, there is an article online that goes into the nitty-gritty of the technical details, but give us a flavour, what does this new data architecture look like? What are the core ideas behind it? What are you trying to achieve, and why? Big questions. Big questions. Yeah, I'll go through some of the core concepts here, but again, as you said, recommend going through the Monzo blogs, and you'll see it there for more details. As I mentioned with the before picture, we had a lot of manual processes. So what are our three core principles? It's to be opinionated, formalize the data sharing process, and to automate as much as possible. And with those three things, we kind of branched into different conclusions, if you will. And with the being opinionated, we came up with these, or the team came up with this, the different layers of how we model. And these layers are split into four. We've got landing, normalized, logical, and presentation. Landing uses familiar language. If anyone has done any data modeling before, they probably know what to expect here. Flattening raw events, payloads, making it nice and clean. Here we introduce concepts like event timelines, where you have essentially a full audit log of everything that has happened to an event. Very, very long, very good for you to go and audit if something goes wrong, but it's not doing too many transformations here. Then for the next layer, which is the normalized layer, we have the supposed object-orientated part of the logic, where we look upstream towards the actual events themselves in the back end and go, okay, well, where should these events have been? Where are they part of one object, right? And I think the best example I can give is always the accounts example. The way that the backend services work at Monzo is that we have, let's say for accounts, we have one event that publishes account created, and then we have another one for account updated, and another one for account deleted, and so on. So by putting these together and creating one single accounts object, then we basically can trace absolutely everything about the accounts. And in the normalized section, we have slightly diminishing, I guess, grains, if you will. So we have things like episodes models that basically squish the event timeline. So if there's the same status between accounts, for example, for several published events, then you can just squish those together. You have things like your dimensions, so this will be just your information about the specific event, and then facts and things like this. And what you'll notice is that traditionally, compared to other data warehouse architectures like the traditional DBT one, is that we've not really joined anything yet. So accounts remains accounts between landing and normalized. So these objects stay the same. And then only afterwards, within the denormalized layer, which splits into two, there's a logical and a presentation, is where we start to put things together. So that's where we'll actually get some useful information out there with accounts being joined into business accounts and users and lending and all these other things. And there in this logical layer, you can create really, really, really useful concepts. And these concepts are ultimately what go to serve the business. And then finally, the presentation layer is our very lightweight, very consumer-shaped models that go straight into dashboards or can be used themselves for reporting, and can also be used for things like third-party integrations and stuff like that. So that's the be opinionated principle, and that's where it led us to. Then the formalize the data sharing process led us to creating the concept of interface models. And the idea here is essentially to create a data contract between the team that's producing and maintaining that interface model for the people consuming it. And DBT themselves have some native support on this concept, slightly different here, but
essentially the idea is whenever there's someone consuming data from it, you, the team who owns the model, can define the terms of when this model is expected to be updated or refreshed, or how people should consume the data from it. And then also, more importantly, almost the meta level of this is that if your team has interfaces, you now know to take care of downstream changes if you are making changes to these interface models. So it almost works like an exposure, but from model to model. So you're basically setting a contract and saying model B, which relies on model A, is going to be used from by any team, and here's the kind of the contract. And so it works well within a company with about 100 different data teams, because as you can imagine, we're all consuming from each other. And it can be quite difficult when you have 12,000 plus models to make a change, and you do your best to try and see if you're going to impact someone downstream, or the hope that with this formalized data sharing approach, then we can hopefully reduce these cases. And then finally, the automate principle, and this one's pretty cool. The two layers that I mentioned, the landing and the normalized layer, they are all built via an internal tool that we built. So this tool essentially generates SQL. The tool's called ModelGen. And you feed it a nice YAML file. Who doesn't like a good YAML file? With all your different parameters and things, and that can include you defining your columns, the sources, where they come from, indeed, whether or not this model will be an interface or not. And then you run a very nice simple ModelGen command on your CLI, and then you get your landing and normalized layer models. And the beauty of the automation here, there's a lot more to it as well, but the beauty of the automation is that it creates standardization within these layers quite well. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea is that now whenever you go into any domain within Monzo, whether a team you're familiar with or not, you'll see the same shaped objects for that specific team. And that really helps both with communication, but also debugging and I guess cross-pollination of knowledge.
That's really interesting. It sounds like user experience has been such a key sort of part of this design and how you're thinking about this new architecture. I think that's really interesting, because I definitely think that that's not something that people have thought about in the past, or many or data teams haven't thought about. But I think as we're moving into, well, clearly as you grow to huge scale, but the newer world that we live in, and as modern data teams mature, I think user experience from a data platform perspective is becoming so much more important. Was that intentional?
100%. I think it's inevitable to try and see user experience as a real lever that you can use to help speed teams up when you have such a large team. We get professionals of all shapes and sizes from all sorts of backgrounds, and we often discuss even beyond the ModelGen and the re-architecture, the user experience and what that looks like. And if there's anyone listening, and if they're considering kind of putting this forward to their senior leaders and kind of trying to explain that thinking about user experience for data is something that's valuable, the thing that I would say is essentially that this is the single biggest change that you can make to the speed that the company produces and consumes data. If it's easy for people to be able to develop data and get insights out faster, then everything else is downstream of that, right? So this is ultimately is a multiplier. And so, 100% it is at our forefront, and I would also encourage others to think about it in the same way.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think there's, we see convergence of roles all the time, but also sort of different departments, and I think that product way of thinking is, it's been a lot long-term data as a product has been a been a bit of a buzzword, but I think applying that product thinking and how a product person maybe thinks about the whole life cycle of something is really, really important. What are some of the impacts then that you're seeing? Obviously, you've described the architecture, you've described the challenges. Is it working?
That's the question, isn't it? That's the It really is. I think none of us had any doubts, to be honest, that we would see good results. Mostly because a lot of the things that we were changing were quite obvious in a way, but seeing those results manifest is really rewarding. Like we mentioned at the beginning, we're about 30 to 40% of the way through. And we are seeing an incredible level of cost reduction. And I wanna give a small caveat to the cost metric here, because cost isn't necessarily the thing that you should be kind of too focused on, especially if you're looking at growth and development. But cost is such a fantastic metric because it kind of encompasses so many other aspects when it comes to data modeling and data development. And for us, we've seen more than 40% cost reduction. And
Bruno, when you're talking about cost reduction here, are you talking about, like, could you be a bit more explicit? Is this data warehousing costs? Is this time cost? I think the cost can be quite a broad metric.
Yeah, it's a great call out. So the cost specifically here is with the data warehousing costs. So our Google Cloud Platform bill, but also in terms of time, we're seeing a lot more, I guess, standardization, right? So we're getting a lot less cases of people not really knowing what these models would look like in a different place, or whenever you go and help debug a model from a different team member because you have some crossover there, a lot faster. So these collaborations have the unaccounted for costs. They don't show up on a receipt, on an invoice at the end of the day, but they're also being seen quite significantly.
Excellent. I think one of the things you mentioned there also is that you built a tool internally. You guys must be approaching the scale of the FANGs, other established banks where the off-the-shelf tooling maybe isn't quite cutting it, and you've got such nuances. How have you found balancing that build versus buy discussion as you're scaling and looking ahead?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. And you're right on the money there again. We have this discussion very, very often, and the challenge of a company getting to this size is that, again, as I said, no other company looks exactly like yours, and it's so true, especially so for data. So there are so many cases where we wish DBT did something slightly differently, or we wish there was a tool that did this for us, or whatever. ModelGen, you could argue, is us making a very clear decision on the build for this particular architecture. And we're definitely not against the concept. I think we're also very aware of trying to not necessarily adhere to industry standards for the sake of doing so, but we're aware that if we do have industry common tooling and things like that, there's a lot of transferability, right, that can happen between those. But there are cases where we just can't solve the problem with what's out there, and so building almost becomes the only possible option for the very specific parameters that we have, right, which every company has their own.
Excellent. Yeah, it's always that scale, I think, which comes into it, and the nuance, and we can probably touch on that in a second actually as well, when it comes to, I suppose, AI and is it coming for your job. But I think that what you've said is the data and the nuance of data and a data estate, I think we can probably touch upon, but it's probably what makes data a very stable place in the what's coming with the revolution. Before we move on to AI and workflows and how you're using LLMs as tools, Bruno, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned as part of this sort of transformation? And yeah, what surprised you most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll start backwards. I think what surprised me most was just the sheer scale that we were working at, and kind of reluctantly accepting that the solutions that I've thought of in the past in previous companies that were much smaller don't work here. They're just not gonna work, and it's for a variety of reasons. But I think just the sheer size and the amount of data that you're managing, and then also just how many people there are working on the same repo. I think we get something crazy like 50 or more PRs merged a day. Like it's a level. It's really really crazy to think about. So for me, to be honest, to this day, I still get surprised with just kind of how big the ship is that we're trying to steer. And then following on from that, I think the biggest lesson for me has been really an appreciation for the limits of the tooling that's out there. And when I say tooling, I don't just mean DBT. I mean things like, Google BigQuery, the limits that it has. I didn't know it had limits. Turns out it does. Just throw some really big petabyte size models at it, and you'll see the limits very quickly. And so for me, it's been like almost an appreciation again of how interesting the data space is. Because if GCP, AWS, Snowflake, all the big ones haven't really solved for this scale and size that works for everyone out of the box, and then all of our jobs are gone, then really this is a very interesting space to be in. And so for me, the lesson really has been just an appreciation for how these tools work and their limits, and that there are limits and it's not all magic.
I think there's a lesson in there to thinking about the tools that you're using and understanding how they're working. The modern data stack's been brilliant, but I think there's plenty of people in the industry that just know how to use the tool, but not necessarily how the tool works and why it's working in that way. And I think the best engineers that I've placed and see go on incredible career journeys are the ones that do understand what's going on behind the scenes in their tooling. So I think just that. Yep. You've got an even bigger appreciation, but I think just a lesson in that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, Bruno, as I've alluded to you, we've known each other for quite some time. You were actually kind enough to speak at our meetup, the London Analytics Engineering meetup last year, and give your 2 cents on LLMs and AI, particularly when it comes to inside the AE workflow. I loved your takeaway, and mine was that an LLM is literally a tool like we've been discussing behind, and there is mechanisms behind it that have its limitations, etc. So yeah, for those that didn't make the meetup, what you're doing, sign up to our meetup page. Could you talk to us a bit about how you personally use AI in your workflow, and what are some of the real examples and benefits you've seen? Because I think it's something that everyone obviously is needing to grasp as these tools become more prolific and important.
Yeah, 100%. I'll first start by also shouting out the talk, the meetups. Do go; they're incredible, and it was really an honor to speak at them. So thank you, Cognify, for the opportunity. Yes. How do I use AI, LLMs, MCPs? God, all the buzzwords.
Sure.
Yeah, I think starting from a place of understanding that they are tools and not magic. That was kind of the title of my talk last year. They really are tools. They're really good tools, and they can do a lot if you are willing to put the time in to actually get the most out of them. I think the example I gave was somebody using a pencil in my talk, which you can use. I'm not a particularly good artist, so I draw very poorly, but someone with the same pencil can create this beautiful work of art. And I think it's the same thing with LLMs. At the moment, I think not just within the data industry, but just probably all of humanity are just learning what this new way of working with this non-deterministic computer program, if you want to call it, which is almost seems like an oxymoron to say. And we're all still in the discovery phase, trying to understand what the limitations are and what we can do. But then the other side of that is that people almost expect it to do too much. And I think back in 2022, 2023, when GPT came out and we were all amazed and wowed by all the different things that it could do, we almost expected it to continue going down this path of, oh, we won't need to do anything anymore because AI will just figure it all for us. And I don't need apps anymore because I'll just like write a prompt and it will go do the thing for me. We've not really seen it get there yet. And, you know, I'm not a pessimist per se. I do think that maybe one day we can get there, but I think it's slightly further than perhaps some people might lead you to believe. And if you then subscribe to that philosophy and you see this as a tool, then you don't feel bad about spending time tweaking your LLM buddy to become better. And you can actually create some really, really cool things. And here talking about, you know, my day-to-day usage, I think in platform, I use it a lot less when it comes to actioning, you know, like a data model or something like this. But when I was in ops, it was a superpower that I had, put plainly. Not only was I able to go in and generate code, high quality code very quickly, but it gave me this ability to, you know, not only do more than one thing at once, which is the LLM agentic dream, I suppose, but it also gave me this really, really, really powerful ability, which I spoke about in my talk, which is to be able to pivot. I think everyone who has been an IC for a long time or has gone down the IC path from more senior routes has had this feeling when it comes to working on something for a long time, and then you go to your stakeholder and they go, oh, actually, can it do this thing instead? And for as much as you're trying to hold that smile during that Zoom call, internally you're kind of going, oh boy, like I don't want to do this. No, like why are they asking this? It took me so long to get this data together. Don't they know that the thing that they're asking for lives in like 4 different tables and all different granularities? Like how are we going to get this data in there? Nowadays, when that happens, I go, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. Let's pivot. Let's go back and start again. And I think even more proactively is that I can kind of do that myself. This tool and this new paradigm, I think there's been lots of articles talking about how software developers are no longer developers, they're more like software reviewers. So you're reviewing code a lot more than writing. But the truth of the matter is that if you are reviewing code more often, then you have a lot more time to think about what you're doing and how you're going to do it and whether or not that's best for your specific use case. And that ability to, you know, detach from the work that you're doing and go, do I need to rethink this? Do I need to pivot here? Would there be a better way to do it? And removing that barrier and friction to starting again or tweaking, genuinely to me feels like a superpower. And I think, you know, especially at the beginning of last year when I just joined, people kind of did talk about me in that way, and I would very quickly go, have you heard of our Lord and Savior Claude Code or Gemini CLI or Codex, whichever one you're using? And it's like, yeah, there's no secret here. I'm not a superhuman. I just have a really good tool. I again, in my day-to-day, it is a daily thing. It's like if I was to ask anyone, like, oh, Do you use the internet on your day-to-day? It's like, yes, of course I do. So even within platform, though I'm doing a lot more code and platformy things, I still use it every day, and it's really, really valuable. Spend some time, build out your niche and how you want your agent to work with you. Obviously help others as well if you can to help speed them up. But you can really get some really good use out of it.
Amazing. I think it sounds like it gives you a bit more of this almost like elasticity to think about how you're building something, rather than just getting your head down into the weeds and just sort of focusing in. You can take that step back to be a bit more malleable with your thought process, a bit more philosophical of, is this the right thing to do? And then the execution is that lower barrier of entry done by the agent. Any tips for anyone that's just is looking to up how they use Claude or any of the LLMs?
Yeah. I think the first thing I'll say is that you're not behind. The field changes so often that whichever day you decide to pick up an article or just open up Claude or whatever it is and start trying things out, you're not behind. Things change very often, so go try things, go play. Don't have that fear of not being able to explore, because I think that's the best way to get that experience and try things. The other thing that I always recommend, and this one's a bit meta, is Claude knows Claude very well, Gemini knows Gemini very well, and GPT knows Codex very well. If you don't know, don't open up another tab and go, Google, a much worse search tool called Google. Ask it there. It knows how to do the thing. What is it that you want to do? Oh, I want this thing that automates how I pull data from this place, and puts it into a report. Okay, go speak with it. Go brainstorm and see how it can do it. And it knows its capabilities very well. Although it won't necessarily guide you and steer you as much as a human would when you're going down the wrong path. But for a starting point, it's pretty good. Just go play. And I speak a little bit about this in my in one of my blog posts at quick plug brunofields.com, which is the different levels of the agentic ladder, if you will. And one of those levels is specifically this like Ouroboros of knowledge consumption, where you're no longer dependent on external sources. You think of a concept and you ask it to tell you if it's possible and how it can be done. And then you just get into this positive feedback loop of just, I can create anything, and you can learn so much from that. Yeah,
I'll say I've never written a line of code in my life, but I think it was your advice of telling Claude that you're a complete novice and start me at the beginning. We've been able to build some pretty cool applications and automations even in Cognify. So for someone that doesn't code to be able to do that, if you can, then it is powerful. How does this fit into what a new AE should look like, Bruno? You've said, do you use the internet? Of course. How is this changing the skills that an AE should be developing today? What matters more in this AI-driven world?
Yes. For me, it comes back to a point you mentioned when we were talking about knowing the limits of the tools. I think the most important skill for you to have is understanding the fundamentals. If you no longer need to spend 80% of your career memorizing syntax and remembering how to do different things with specific languages and do all that sort of stuff, and what syntax I should use for this package and which package I should use for this solution, it frees up a lot of time. And I think where you should be putting that time is in really understanding the fundamentals. And that can go down to really low level, like tech understanding of your data warehouse. How does it actually partition data? How does it work? How do you get this information the fastest, depending on what your role is? To me, that is the most important part. If you're business facing, right, and you have a lot of stakeholders that are either the customers themselves or PMs and things like this, understand the product better, understand what it is that you're working on better. Like, that is what this frees you up for. And that is ultimately, to me, what I think will create a shield, I guess, against this very, very, very rapidly changing tide and paradigm, I guess, within not just the analytics engineering role, but all of data. That to me is the most important thing, is understanding the fundamentals, understanding your tools very well. Where are the limits? And then if you are on the customer facing side, really, really understanding your product and just kind of, being able to leverage this as a tool, like as you would any other tool.
Where do you think the industry's going then? What's it going to evolve into? And I'm not going to hold you to account on this, as you said, it's changing month by month. But getting a bit philosophical, where do you see the industry going, and the part that I suppose analytics engineers and I suppose wider data folks play? I guess check in on me in a couple of months and see how right I am. But that's a question that we all are thinking, right? I spoke with my very good friend Toby Henley-Smith, who also did a talk for Cognify at the beginning of the year. Great talk. If you were there, you would know. And one point that he brought up in his talk was what, at its core, what is an analytics engineer? And he gave a very great analogy, which was, if you removed Figma, do you remove the designer? Is the designer still a designer? What is it that makes a designer a designer? And I think the thing that we both agreed on quite fundamentally is that we are more than our tools. And if LLMs and agentic CLI tooling are indeed just that, tools, then you should be in a position where you're quite resilient to these changes, because what you provide is still valuable, which is insights and thought and architecture and infrastructure, but in a very broad sense of understanding what it is that a data platform needs, or a data insight is for the business. And that's something that I think won't go away. The other, I guess not really even an analogy, because this is exactly what did happen, which is that back in the days, 50s, 60s, even before then, part of the role of an analyst existed then, and part of that role was to do spreadsheeting. Now, for us, when we say spreadsheets, we think Excel and a computer that goes and does a lot of things for you. But back then, you actually had to draw out on a piece of paper with your little pen and actually draw out this whole spreadsheet. And yes, there were people who were really, really good at doing that and really enjoyed that element, and they were very, very good at producing those insights. But then with the advent of computers becoming more common and spreadsheets being able to be done digitally, the role of the analyst didn't disappear. It's still around. It's just that the tools that the analyst uses has changed. And I think similarly, I don't know what the future is going to look like, right? I don't know how good LLMs are going to get within the next 1, 2, 5 years. But what I do know is that for as long as humans are still the ones mostly running a company, then humans will still require translation, insights, understanding of business goals, and understanding the mathematical side, like the events and the data points, and translating that into business insights. That's still going to be needed. And so for me, I think the what you'll be doing will be
completely different probably in 5 years' time. But the why you're doing it is probably still going to be the same.
Well, fascinating insight, and I think a nice optimistic look compared to what you do see out there. And I couldn't agree more. You know, every industrial revolution or change in technology has always disrupted areas, but you know, it's the roles have adapted and persisted. Everyone's thought there's going to be an extinction of a role whenever there's been a big technological advance, but there hasn't always been the case. So, Bruno, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Before I let you go, what's your most, would you say, is your most controversial view on the data industry itself?
Ooh, that's a great question. I have so many of these hot takes. I'll give you one that I think is a little bit spicy, but I also think if anyone listening can take action from it and kind of help improve this, it would really help. Which is ultimately that I think data is still incredibly immature, and I think we need to start treating it like a first-class citizen within companies. There's an old adage, I think every data team I've ever worked for has said, no, we're not a service team, right? It's not like we don't get like these tickets and then we do the thing and then we put it back and then we have angry stakeholders, right? We're going to try and be there, close to the product, close to the business. We're going to try and bring these insights proactively. And then you go and check in on the day-to-day of what you actually do as a data person, and it looks a lot like a service. And I think it's because we're still really, really immature from a discipline point of view. The other point of evidence that I have here is that working in data from company to company changes drastically. I have friends who are called data analysts who do more data engineering than I do, and I've got friends that are called data engineers who do more purely data analytics. Like, even the fact that we can't agree as an industry on what these roles are, and I'm not even touching on analytics engineer because, oh Lord, but the fact that we still can't agree.
Engineers as Monzo,
right? Like, what do we call them? But the point is that we still don't really have this stable foundation, and I think we really need to have it. I think we often compare ourselves to our cousins over in the software engineering side, and we often try to replicate by titles and by role style, right? Like data engineer and all of these other things. And I think something that they've nailed and done very, very well is they've created a good set of expectations within the roles. So a backend engineer does backend stuff and a front-end engineer does front-end stuff. But within data, there's still a lot of cases of, and if anyone out there is listening can relate to this, okay, yes, I got hired as an analytics engineer, but you're the only data person in the team at the moment, and you are expected to go pull some data from some... go pull some data from some dashboard and then set up an experiment for us real quick, and like, can you provide some a report on an analysis on this thing and so on. And again, it's not even the specific analytics engineer title or data engineer or whatever. It's just because you have data in the name and your company probably doesn't really know what that means. Like, oh, you're a data scientist, I don't really know what that means. Or like, oh, you're an analytics engineer, okay, you've got analytics, cool, that means you do analytics. For me, I think that's probably the most frustrating part still of being within the data space, but something that I see improving. And again, a huge shout out to Cognify, to you guys, because I think things like the meetups for analytics engineers, very recently you also had the inaugural data science and AI meetup. Also recommend everybody sign up to that. These spaces create a sense of community, and whenever we can go there and talk about these topics, it slowly creates this middle ground of like, okay, we can all agree we all do this thing. And these meetups and community events that you guys organize help accelerate us to get to a position of a more mature state within the role for the data discipline. So biggest pet peeve, I absolutely despise this. I'll probably never stop talking about this because it won't go away in my lifetime. But I'm very thankful for Cognify and for people that set up these community events.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point, and you can imagine I also deal with that on a daily and weekly basis. And I would agree that I think sometimes the challenge comes in the type of the organisations and where they are in their data maturity, and it's actually sometimes I think it very much is to blame on the data industry, because so many people outside of the data industry have no idea. Spoke to someone recently, chief of staff, who said, I need a data person. Okay, let's break it down. What do you actually need here? And I think there needs to be a bit of education and a bit of accountability on the data organisations and departments to help educate, which comes back to the championing, which is maybe a nice full loop to leave it on.
There we go. Yes, 100%.
Bruno, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And yeah, if you've enjoyed hearing what Bruno's had to say today, I couldn't recommend his. Is it Substack?
It's just my own website, brunofields.com.
brunofields.com. Head over to and follow that. I'll also put a link to his LinkedIn as well as the Monzo blog about the architecture that we've discussed today. But yeah, for now, Bruno, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Harry, and always a pleasure working with Cognify.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick one from me. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you could hit that follow button or leave us a rating. Even better, pass the show on to a friend who might also get some insight from it. It really helps us grow the community and continue to share amazing conversations. I also wanted to take a minute to talk to you about Cognify. For those of you that don't know, Cognify is the leading recruitment partner for modern data teams. We help some of the world's best organizations scale data and drive real value from the hires that they make. If you're thinking about building a team or making a hire and you're struggling with talent or just want some insights on the market, then I'd love to jump on a call with you and tell you a bit more. Equally, if you're looking for a job and want to find your next dream role, then reach out to myself or any of the Cognify team. We'd be happy to see if there's anything on our books that we can help you with and give you general advice on the industry. Finally, a big thank you to Omni, this season's sponsor. If you'd like to learn more about the AI analytics that Omni can deliver you, then check out the link in the show notes or come speak to me. I can happily point you in the right direction. Again, thanks for listening and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time.